Dr. Chris Grant, you are safe now in Poland, but a few weeks ago, your family's life was absolutely turned upside down. So let's kind of start from the beginning. What brought you to Ukraine, and then what was the indication I need to leave Ukraine?
Sure. I was awarded a Fulbright Scholarship from the Department of State to conduct research and teach in Ukraine. It was actually supposed to be effective in 2020. Because of the COVID pandemic, it had been delayed twice, and I was there for the spring of 2022. My 12-year-old daughter was the only one of my three kids who was game to join me for this time. And on January 1st, we flew to Kyiv and moved into our apartment and had just kind of settled in. I was starting to do interviews on my research. My research looks at how you form strong civil identity in a country that has major divisions in it. Obviously, Ukraine has a major division in it, territorial. And I had just made my first lecture at the university, and we got a notification from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv that said all Fulbrighters need to be out of the country effective January 27th, which was 4 weeks ago today.
Oh, wow.
I'll be honest, at the time I thought it was a little overly cautious because nothing seemed to be too crazy in Kyiv at the time. And however, when your funder says you must leave, you leave. And so we flew to Poland a few days later, and then I took my daughter back to the States, and now I'm back here to work on my grant.
So what was it like in the weeks kind of leading up to your evacuation? Because I know here following the news, it felt like we were on pins and needles. Will they, won't they invade? You know, you lived in research alongside Ukrainians, but what was kind of life like in that lead up?
I think that one of the things that our withdrawal, the decision that was made by the State Department to move out, we're not diplomats. We are attached to the State Department because of the grant funding. I think part of that was to give a clear indication to the Ukrainian government that the United States really saw problems coming. And because what was going on in Ukraine is there was kind of a stoicism that, you know, Russia threatens us all the time. They took two provinces away in 2014. They do this stuff all the time. This is not different.
Right.
And I think this was the first way that the Biden administration communicated this is different. It's the warnings are much bigger. And as a scholar of the region, I even thought, well, this happens all the time. But then today, when I was looking at bombs going off all over the country, including Kyiv, you go, oh, I'm very glad that they got us out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you know, this has happened, the threats have happened before. This was kind of prolonged over weeks. Was there fear in Ukraine in the last couple weeks or when evacuation started happening?
When I left, I had a conversation with my landlord, and she was like, well, this seems really ridiculous. Can't you just tell them no? And I said, no, I can't tell them no. They give me my money, so I can't pay my rent if I don't do what I'm told to do. But I think everybody thought the United States was overreacting in the beginning, and including the president of Ukraine, who went on television and essentially said as much. But I think that the last 10 days, from what I've been able to communicate with people that are still in Ukraine, the tension has been going up steadily. And there has been a realization that this may well be a much bigger event than what had been seen in the past. And this, after all, is the largest military advance in Europe since the Second World War. I mean, there have been wars over here before, not of this magnitude.
Well, yeah, because like I said, you know, kind of following this, when it was 100,000 troops along the Ukrainian border, it really started to feel so real. But kind of relying on not just your experience, but also your expertise, your research. What is your reaction to what was happening overnight and also kind of the future of Ukraine?
I think I'm very, very saddened is what I can say. I've done a lot of work on Georgia and Moldova, Azerbaijan and Armenia, and Ukraine was the last of my cases that I was really looking forward to getting into and understanding civic identity in it. And of course, we hear a lot in the media that this is Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers, and there's
Right.
really conflict over what language. That's not true. I can tell you, I know many Russian speaking Ukrainians who are very patriotic toward Ukraine. And public opinion polls would demonstrate that percent or more people who live in Ukraine have no interest in living in Russia. They don't want Russian incursions. And regardless of what language you spoke, and I was starting to do interviews that were confirming this hypothesis, there was a strong sense of wanting self determination, freedom of the Ukrainian territory to be able to make their own way in the future, and a deep desire to be a part of the West, join NATO, be a part of the
Right.
European Union. That this is how Ukrainians really wanted to see their country move forward. And so I feel very sad right now because people that I've met and know who are good people, certainly aren't militants, not even political necessarily, have had those dreams really crushed by this event. I would have told you before that I didn't think there was much hope for Ukraine to join the EU or NATO
Right.
until a lot of things changed. But it becomes even more impossible when you're being occupied by a hostile foreign power. And I think for the last 30 years, Ukrainians have had hope.
So, what is kind of the sentiment in Ukraine towards the U.S.? We've heard what President Zelensky hopes for, but what do the Ukrainian people, whether it was the people you worked alongside for, think that the role that the U.S. should play in this conflict?
Well, I think there's many Ukrainians that would like to see the United States get involved in direct defense of Ukraine, and I also do not think that's going to happen. Nor do I actually think that's in the best interest of the United States and the world, for that matter. But I think there's many Ukrainians that would like that. In general, Ukrainians have a very positive view toward the United States. The United States has been a major contributor of aid to Ukraine, and that includes not just military aid, but food aid and tech aid and business aid. And we've worked very hard to help Ukrainian markets to expand and survive and prosper. And the United States has been a great benefactor to Ukraine, and there are a number of Ukrainian diaspora in the United States. So
Right.
people know people who live in the United States. They have a positive image of the United States. They see us as friends. There is a warm regard for Americans in Ukraine.
And then my last question to you is, is there anything that you want to add looking back at the research that you've done, being there? I think for a lot of Americans, there was a bit of a surprise that this has transpired so quickly. But what's kind of your reaction and anything that you just want to add now that the invasion has started?
Sure. I think it's very concerning to look at a people with identity and self-determination and a desire to progress in a certain direction, and then to see a powerful neighbor decide to thwart that through military means. It's not the case that no one has ever, that the United States has never tried to influence the politics of another country, but this is a direct affront against a people's right to self-determine, and it's very upsetting to that point. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, if you listen to some of the propaganda that's coming out of Moscow, is that there is a genocide against Russian speakers, or the fascists were on the rise in Ukraine and they were militarizing. But President Zelensky is a Russian speaking Jewish person. And so when you want to hear that rhetoric, just remember that the Ukrainian people elected a Russian speaking Jew to be their president. And so I think the notions that are being put out about Ukraine are just really off base, and we have an obligation to educate ourselves and understand there's more to it than just whatever the beams that are coming out of Moscow are.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know we'll continue to follow this as the events continue to unfold. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Grant, and please continue to stay safe.
I will definitely stay safe. Thank you very much for asking me, and I'm always ready to come back and say more if I have more to say.